Thailand is a country that is deeply connected to spirituality. For many Thai citizens, the line between the physical world and the spirit realm thin, and the presence of ghosts or spirits is widely accepted as a natural part of existence. This belief is shaped by a mix of ancient traditions, including folklore passed down through generations, as well as Buddhism, the country's predominant religion. For many people in Thailand, the belief in the supernatural also stems from a deep respect for the unknown, which makes ghost stories and hauntings a significant and intriguing part of Thai culture. It's a big reason why some of the most acclaimed horror movies originate from the country, and also some of the most intriguing folklore. One of the most well-known supernatural entities in Thai folklore is the spirit called Phai Thai Hong, or in English, the vengeful spirits of a violent demise. These are the spirits of people who have met a sudden and violent end, and as a result their souls are restless, forever bound to the place where they met their end and doomed to never find peace. It is believed that these spirits wander aimlessly through the streets, hiding in the darkest alleys and waiting, but what are they waiting for? Well, there is a strong belief that the Phai Thai Hong are spirits with an appetite for vengeance. They will often try to kill other living people in the same manner of which they had died themselves, and the more violent their death, the stronger these spirits become. As a consequence, they are among some of the most feared ghosts in Thai culture. In many parts of Thailand, people go to great lengths to appease these restless souls. They would set up shrines and place food offerings near accident sites or places that have been marked by tragedy. The hope is that these offerings would calm the spirits and grant them peace. According to the folklore, an eerie stillness lingers in places where these spirits dwell, as if the very ground holds onto the memory of the tragedy that occurred. There's a sense that something is amiss, and unexplainable, unsettling presence, like a feeling that you're being watched. That ominous feeling was palpable on the morning of October 4, 2016 at the Princess Mother National Institute for Drug Abuse Treatment, also known as Thayrak Hospital, in Pathum Thani's Thanyaburi district. That morning, a janitor at the drug treatment facility was hauling a heavy bag of trash toward the dumpster behind the hospital. It was a routine he knew well, one he had done hundreds of times before. But on that day, as the dim light of morning began to creep across the sky, he spotted something unusual near the edge of a shallow canal. He squinted, trying to make sense of the dark shape that broke the surface of the water. For a few seconds, he convinced himself it was nothing more than a bundle of debris, a collection of discarded clothes or garbage caught in the reeds. But something about the shape seemed too large to still. He hesitated, swallowing back his nerves, and cautiously took a few steps closer to the water's edge. The closer he got, the more his unease grew, and then finally the outline of the shape became clearer, taking form in a way that made his stomach turn. And then he saw it, a pale figure face down, floating lifelessly. But this wouldn't be the only grim discovery that day. In fact, the horror had just begun. Situated just a short distance away from the capital city of Bangkok, the province of Pathum Thani has a life of its own, a restless, pulsing energy that can often leave one feeling uneasy due to its unpredictable nature. The streets around here are always teeming with movement and noise. The air feels thick with humidity mixed with the smell of street food and the sharp fumes of gasoline from the endless stream of tuk-tuks whizzing by. Above the clatter of engines, the cries of street vendors ring out. While it may seem overwhelming to many, there is a chaotic beauty to the way life unfolds here, a blend of vibrant color and clashing sounds. Yet Pathum Thani is a province caught between two worlds. It's a place where rapid urban development collides with the past. On one side, modern skyscrapers cut into the sky and massive construction projects are seen on every corner of the city. On the other hand, the Chao Phraya River winds slowly through the land, muddy and ancient. People come to Pathum Thani for many reasons: to seek opportunity, to build a life, or simply to escape. Yet amidst the thousands of office workers and commuters who pass through its streets each day, there are those who remain unseen and forgotten. These are people who live on society's fringes, those who may have lost their way and never got back. In hidden alleys, beneath rusted bridges, and in the quiet, forgotten corners of the city lie places of refuge for the homeless. Some are local citizens who have faced immense hardship, others are undocumented migrants, and still more are those who have simply fallen through the cracks of life. While they are in plain sight, many drift through Pathum Thani like ghosts, sleeping in makeshift shelters of plastic or cardboard and with their possessions bound tightly together in plastic bags. They blend into the city's underbelly, existing just beneath the surface of its vibrant, chaotic heart. But on October 4, 2016, near the Princess Mother National Institute for Drug Abuse Treatment, a body was found discovered by a janitor while taking out the trash. Lying in a muddy canal near the dumping site was the lifeless body of a woman. At first glance, her limbs appear to have been twisted at unnatural angles. Her face was partly submerged in the water, her eyes wide open and empty, staring blankly into the morning light. The sight stopped the janitor in his track, and a chill ran down his spine as he struggled to comprehend what lay before him. But as he stood frozen in shock, something else caught his eye. Just a few meters away, partially hidden beneath the tall grass and debris, was another body floating lifelessly in the water. This one too drifted in the canal, with its face hidden beneath layers of grass and garbage. A surge of panic likely gripped the janitor as the realization sunk in. He staggered backward, dropping the heavy trash bag from his trembling hands. With his heart pounding out of his chest, he fumbled for his phone, fingers shaking uncontrollably as he struggled to dial the police. Within minutes, word of the discovery had spread like wildfire. A small crowd started to form at the scene. Hospital staff and passers-by stood by, their eyes wide with shock, whispering quietly to one another as they pointed toward the site. The police arrived swiftly, and soon the area was cordoned off with yellow tape, keeping the onlookers at a distance. Hours after the bodies were removed, the police had successfully identified them. The first body found belonged to a 38-year-old woman named Supaporn Kanjudi, and the second was that of a young man, Supran Cochran, just 25 years old. When the reports were released, shock rippled through the hospital staff as these names were all too familiar. Both of them were known to those who worked around the hospital grounds. They were homeless individuals frequently seen scavenging for food or seeking shelter nearby. Some of the staff members may have even offered them food or drinks from time to time, making the news of their deaths all the more unsettling and personal. To many, their deaths may have seemed like just another harsh episode in the unforgiving life on the streets. A tragic but not unheard of event in Pathum Thani. It could have been a deal gone wrong, an unpaid debt, or a dangerous encounter at the wrong time and place. However, there was no doubt that something about the scene felt off. The way Supaporn's body lay twisted in the water, and how Supaporn's lifeless form was found not far away, suggested that this was more than just an unfortunate episode of street life. It was unsettling, almost haunting. According to reports, the male victim Supran suffered severe injuries, including deep gashes across his forehead and a wound on his chin. However, the brutality inflicted on the female support was even more gruesome. She bore 3 large slashes across her chest and abdomen, and forensic evidence indicated that she had been sexually assaulted prior to her death. Yet the most chilling detail was that both of them had their hands tightly bound with electrical cords. This was no ordinary homicide. The brutality and precision of the attack suggested that whoever committed these murders had a deep-seated hatred or a personal vendetta against the victims. But what left the authorities truly puzzled was the nature of the victims themselves. Supran and Supaporn were known to be harmless. They were simply homeless individuals living hand-to-mouth, wandering the streets, trying to make it through each day. They had no apparent enemies, no connections to any criminal activity, at least not that anyone knew of. These were just 2 lives that had been overshadowed by hardship. So why would someone target them for such a brutal killing? And most pressing of all, who was behind this? After the gruesome discovery of the 2 victims, a haunting silence settled over Thanyurak Hospital and its surroundings. In Thai culture, death is not just a passing of life. Sometimes it stirs something far deeper. It was believed that the way these 2 were murdered, bound, and brutalized would inevitably summon the Phai Tai Hong, With their violent and sudden deaths and the desperate lives they had led, there was a strong fear that their spirits would rise restless, angry, and vengeful. For the next 2 days, locals began to gather near the site. Small offerings had also began to appear, bundles of incense, food, and candles flickering in the wind, along with makeshift shrines to honor the spirits of Supern and support. It was an attempt by the locals to appease them, to keep the haunt at bay, for they knew the danger of vengeful ghosts wandering close to the living. Not only had they been killed in a brutal manner, but they were also homeless souls who had endured great hardship in life only to meet an even more tragic end. It was a hard life, a life of constant struggle, but never one that should have ended in such a horrific way. The deaths of Superon and Suon made national headlines almost immediately. But it was the senselessness of the crime that left many with questions. Yet what no one could have foreseen was that these discoveries were just the beginning. The mystery would deepen because another body was about to be found. 2 days after the discovery, near the vicinity of the same treatment facility, a Cambodian fisherman made his way to the canal carrying his fishing gear in hopes of catching something to eat or sell. Just a stone's throw away was the garbage area of the hospital, which had now been transformed into an active crime scene investigation. But that morning the area was eerily quiet, offering a rare moment of solitude. The man had likely been there before, familiar with the best spots to cast his line into the murky water. But on this day something felt different. As he walked along the bank preparing to set up his gear, something unusual caught his eye. A shape in the water that didn't look quite right. It seemed like a bundle of discarded trash caught in the reeds, not a sight that was uncommon in these waters. But as he stepped closer to the edge and peered down, it became immediately clear that this was no ordinary find. There, floating face down in the water, was a man's body. Immediately the police were called and the body was carefully pulled from the canal. The victim was identified to be a 40-year-old man named Sathian Sornchai. At first glance, it was clear he had suffered a brutal death. His wrists were found to be tightly bound with electrical wire. Deep gashes were seen slashed across his throat, and multiple stab wounds were discovered on his abdomen and buttocks. Close by, a sleeping and a few scattered belongings drifted quietly on the surface of the water. For a moment, investigators likely suspected that these items had belonged to the victim, remnants of a life lived on the margins. But it wasn't just the gruesomeness of the scene that left everyone reeling. It was the sudden, chilling realization that this case felt all too familiar. There was a pattern, albeit a rather disturbing one. Just like the previous victims, Zur and Sur police discovered that Sathian was homeless, a vulnerable person who had faced a brutal and untimely death. What made this even more unsettling was the striking similarity to the earlier murders. Sathian's body was found with injuries that were similar to those suffered by Supern and Sworn. In addition, all 3 bodies had been found in close proximity to one another near Thanurak Hospital. The news of this third murder spread quickly, moving like a creeping fog through narrow alleys and into the homes of residents. For investigators in Pathum Thani, the signs were glaringly obvious. This was not a random act of violence, nor an unfortunate string of street crimes. These killings followed a pattern. Each victim was met with brutal force, bound and left in the same hauntingly familiar circumstances. In the days that followed, the police swiftly reached the conclusion and voiced their fears. This was most definitely the work of a serial killer, one who preys on the most vulnerable. At that moment, Pathum Thani was no longer just a city, it had become a hunting ground, and the clock was ticking. It was early October 2016, and the Pathum Thani police station was a flurry of activity. Phones rang, voices barked orders, and radios crackled with urgent chatter. Every officer moved with purpose, eyes locked in focus, brows furrowed. The hunt for the serial killer had begun. Just a day earlier, the bodies of 38-year-old Supapran Kongi and 25-year-old Supern had been discovered stabbed and dumped into the canal in front of Thanurak Hospital. The forensic team had worked tirelessly into the night, combing through the pieces of evidence that was left behind. Among the items collected from the scene was a t-shirt faintly speckled with blood. The stains were almost imperceptible tiny spots scattered across the worn fabric, but they were enough to spark a glimmer of hope for the investigation. Feelings of anticipation bubbled as investigators prepared to compare the genetic material on the shirts with samples collected from the crime scenes, hoping for the crucial breakthrough they so desperately needed. But then the case quickly took a new turn as several officers noticed a surveillance camera that was mounted nearby. Immediately, they began sifting through hours of surveillance footage from around Thayerek Hospital. In dimly lit room, officers huddled around the glowing monitors, their eyes fixed on grainy clips that played back in slow motion. It was painstaking work, but there was hope because the killer's identity could be hiding somewhere within these flickering images. Then, after hours of exhaustive review, they found something. One officer paused the video, his finger hovering over the screen. In the faint glow of a distant street light, the silhouette of a man came into view at the very edge of the camera's frame. He appeared to be riding a bicycle through the narrow alleys. Another officer observed the details: an old rusty model with a large basket attached to the front. After reviewing the footage and interviewing witnesses, they managed to create a sketch. The man had a narrow face, sunken eyes, and an unsettlingly thin frame. This was then compared to the thousands of images through their database, but there was nothing. The suspect was a ghost completely unknown. A heavy silence settled over the investigation as a haunting question surfaced. What if this killer was even more elusive than they had imagined? By October 7, 2016, fear had spread like wildfire through Pathum Thani. Whispers of a serial killer filled the air, echoing down alleys and circulating through shelters. Conversations among residents were dominated by the news of the murders, while the homeless community, long accustomed to the harshness of street life, now faced a new kind of fear. The streets felt different. It felt darker, more threatening. By this time, the police were growing desperate for a breakthrough. They spread word of the suspect throughout the city, warning that a serial killer might be on the loose and urging the public to help bring justice for the homeless victims. Meanwhile, the suspect's sketch was plastered everywhere on lamp posts, walls, and storefronts. His face even flashed across television screens in what felt like a last-ditch effort to uncover any leads, and then finally they caught a break. The phone at the Pathum Thani police station rang sharply. An officer on duty picked up, only to be met by the urgent voice of a traffic policeman from the Moi bus terminal in Bangkok. There was an unmistakable tension in his tone. He had seen something unusual, something he thought might interest them. Standing at the corner of the bus terminal, the officer had noticed what appeared to be a homeless man sleeping on the side. This wasn't uncommon, but there was something about the man's face that sparked his suspicion. It bore a striking resemblance to the sketch of the suspect. That day, the Market bus terminal in Bangkok was alive with activity, but amid the movement and noise, a few police officers moved purposefully, their eyes scanning the throngs of people cutting a determined path through the bus-busting crowds. Their faces were tense, focused, knowing that they were looking for something or someone specific. And then they saw him, a young man that looked barely out of his teens, slumped against the wall. His shirt was stained with patches of dried blood, dark and unmistakable against the fabric. He looked out of place, almost like a ghost trying to hide in plain sight. His face was hidden beneath the low brim of a worn-out cap, and his body seemed to fold into itself, as if he were trying to vanish into the cold concrete beneath him. To the officers, this could very well be the suspect they had been searching for. But whether his capture would bring answers or further complicate the case was still uncertain. The man was asleep, completely unaware of the world around him, until the officers began to close in on his spot. As they drew nearer, the young man stirred, and an officer called out to him loudly and firmly. In response, the man's eyes snapped open, and panic quickly spread across his face as he locked eyes with the advancing officers. In a flash, he scrambled to his feet and bolted. Running toward an old bicycle that was nearby, he jumped on and pedaled furiously, weaving through the thick morning traffic. The police gave chase immediately, their radios crackling with urgent commands as they sprinted after him. Taking a sharp turn down a side street, the young man thought he might have found an escape, but his luck ran out. An officer stationed nearby lunged forward, grabbing hold of the back of the bike and pulling both of them down to the pavement with a loud crash. The young man had surrendered, lying face down on the hot asphalt as the handcuffs locked around his wrists. While it seemed that Pathum Thani's nightmare had finally been brought to an end, there were still lingering questions. What if they had the wrong man? Inside the interrogation room at the police station, the tension was palpable. The man arrested in connection with the murders of 3 homeless individuals was an undocumented immigrant from Myanmar. A young man with no family ties, no connections, and a background that was difficult to trace. Even till this day, his true identity remains a mystery. But the Thai police refer to him simply as Jimmy. Jimmy was initially arrested for entering Thailand illegally in September, just a month before the first body was discovered. He was briefly detained and deported, but soon managed to slip back across the border undetected. Despite being undocumented, his record showed no signs of criminal behavior, no past charges, no hint of violence until now. As detectives pressed Jimmy with questions, his responses started to grow inconsistent and desperate. The police aimed to extract a confession to make sense of the chaos that had gripped Pathum Thani. They zeroed in on the bloodstains found on his shirt, pushing him for an explanation. Jimmy's hands shook as he insisted the blood was his own, the result of a self-inflicted wound. But the detectives weren't convinced. DNA analysis had already linked the blood on the t-shirt to 2 of the victims, the second and third in the string of murders. By this point, the evidence was overwhelming to the police. It seemed almost certain that they had the right man, 99% sure. Now, all they needed was a confession to bring closure to the case. But on October 9th, just 2 days after Jimmy's arrest, an officer burst into the station. His face pale, another dead body had been found. The news hit everyone hard. This time, the body was found miles away from Thanurak Hospital at the Lot Prao intersection in Bangkok. The victim was a 58-year-old woman named Rampha Panchaparnloit. Like the others, she was homeless. Her hands were found tightly bound with a nylon strip. Her body was covered in bruises and caked in mud. This scene was eerily reminiscent of the previous murders. The autopsy report showed that Rampha had suffered multiple stab wounds, severe bruising, and signs of strangulation. Forensic analysts say that this was likely a deliberate and vicious assault, as if intended to prolong her suffering. The room sank into a heavy silence tinged with disbelief. They already had Jimmy in custody, yet a 4th victim had surfaced, killed in a similarly brutal manner. How on earth could this happen? The discovery of the 4th victim threatened to derail the entire investigation. For the police, it was a moment of doubt, a knowing fear that they might have been pursuing the wrong suspect all along. Yet they pressed forward, determined to uncover the truth, and their persistence paid off. On October 16th, 2 weeks after the discovery of the first body, investigators announced that they were certain of Jimmy being the suspect behind the crimes. But what about the 4th victim, the woman who was found dead even after Jimmy's arrest? Previously, we learned that the police had successfully connected Jimmy to the bloodstains found on his shirt, which were confirmed to be a DNA match with both the 2nd and 3rd victims. But that was only the beginning. Forensic analysis uncovered tiny traces of Jimmy's DNA on the clothing of the 2nd victim, along with strands of his hair tangled in the dirt at the site where the 4th victim had been found. The police also gathered all the surveillance footage from around the crime scenes, piecing together every frame to form a disturbing timeline. As the evidence came together, a clear picture emerged. One that showed how Jimmy had stalked his victims, lured them to secluded areas, and executed the brutal murders with chilling precision. But the deeper the detectives dug, the darker the story became. Just a month before Jimmy's arrest, another murder had taken place. A newspaper vendor found dead in a small park beneath an expressway in Bangkok. His name was Wanchai Neumantry, known to many as Long Yim. His skull had been crushed by a single devastating blow, leaving his body slumped lifelessly against a park bench. When police revisited the evidence from that night, they discovered a crucial detail. The blood on the piece of wood used to bludgeon in Lung Yim was a 100% match to Jimmy's DNA. The timeline was also eerily precise because it was around the time of the murder that Jimmy had made the illegal crossing into Thailand. By October 18, 2016, Jimmy was formally charged with the murders of 3 individuals, while investigations into the remaining victims are still ongoing. But one crucial question loomed large. Why would he target these homeless individuals? At first, investigators suspected they might be dealing with a madman, a person driven by uncontrollable impulses, yet Jimmy didn't fit that profile. Despite the extensive investigation, the motive behind his actions remains unclear to this day, or at least has never been publicly revealed. However, many locals wonder if Jimmy saw his victims as being connected to the Hong, the restless spirits of those who died sudden violent deaths. In certain parts of Thailand, there is a belief that eliminating those tied to the Hong could serve as a form of spiritual cleansing, a means to prevent misfortune or evil from spreading. Maybe Jimmy was trying to do that. Maybe he was trying to carry out his own twisted version of purification. Yet even with all the speculation, the pieces never fully fit. While the reasons for his actions remain shrouded in mystery, the consequences of his crimes were devastatingly clear. As for what will become of Jimmy, that part of the story has yet to be written. But given the nature of his crimes, one outcome seems almost inevitable. He would most likely face the death penalty to pay for what he did. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.